Per-usual, living on this channel is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. It is Wednesday. Let's take a look at some altcoins for the amazingly entitled What Could Go Wrong Wednesday. We're going to start with the liquidity conversation because it's important to understand the pendulum here. Are we swinging in or out? Is there a headwind or tailwind? Is there a seasonal effect? Talked about seasonality yesterday. This is the Treasury General account. So this represents money that is not in the system, but in the bank account of the US Treasury. We don't have today's number yet, but because of taxes yesterday, day before, we get this number every week. The TGA should increase quite a bit from taxes. Now, not everyone pays taxes on the same day. People can pay taxes throughout the year. All that's good and well, but the most significant tax effect should be this week. So we'll get that number at the end of the day today. It's definitely something to watch for because the TGA may swell by quite a bit. Some people are predicting record taxes coming in. And that plays a significant role in markets because the higher everything goes, the harder it is to keep it up if money is flowing out of the system. Only so much money can be buying so many things. That includes Bitcoin, and that especially includes altcoins. If we look at a liquidity estimation in the United States, in the white line there, Fed balance sheet minus TGA minus reverse repo. So as money comes out of the TGA, as money comes out of the reverse repo, that is a positive liquidity effect. If we line that up with rates in the purple in the US and we line that up with Bitcoin price in the yellow, you can clearly see the reflexivity we've had over the years. This isn't anything new. Many people have talked about this, but something else to notice, again, when thinking about seasonality is after COVID, there was a mega correlation immediately that established and sort of broke seasonality a little bit that was post-halving at that time. So you had a bit of a double whammy effect going on there. Fast forward to today, we have rates much higher than 2020. Liquidity, despite QT, is still up quite a bit. You know, there's this idea that the Fed is reducing its balance sheet, and that may be true, that has been true, but the overall liquidity picture, because of money coming out of the reverse repo, has helped the liquidity picture, right? So that's where we're seeing this reflexivity. Yes, we've had ETFs. Yes, we've had inflation come down. For Bitcoin, it's certainly helped a lot. For some alts, they've done well, others not as well, others struggling. But I think it's easier to give all those gains back on alts because rates are still quite high. Even though liquidity might not be restrictive, there's always going to be this yin and yang between, do I buy an altcoin or do I move money into a yielding account, money market account, high yield savings, whatever, right? Eventually there's a tipping point where it just makes more sense to park some cash, some dry powder, and wait for better conditions, especially because everything in the past 6 months is up hundreds, thousands of %, right? Again, how much more do you want? This stuff can only go up so much before people start taking profit, less people buy, more people move liquidity out of the ecosystem, more people move it into yield and just wait for a better time, right? You'll notice pre-2020, even with liquidity coming down from the Fed balance sheet and whatever else, we weren't as coupled. Now this whole thing is a giant chart crime, I get it. But I guess the point here to make is rates probably never coming back to zero in our lifetime, realistically, hopefully. But rates probably coming down within the next 2 years. And that will help the liquidity picture. It will help alts. Certainly we can look at total 2 versus liquidity. And since COVID, since 2021, this has been fairly tight. Again, a chart crime, I get it. But once they started raising rates and taking liquidity out of the ecosystem, that's when Luna collapsed, right? Luna was fine until liquidity started getting sucked out of the ecosystem. That isn't a coincidence. It's probably hard to see here, but the liquidity index was also making head and shoulders at that time. Interesting that broke down. So yes, we've had this upswing-ish in liquidity. That's undeniable thanks to money coming out of the reverse repo. But just based on this correlation, you could probably argue, you know what? We've overshot our liquidity band a little bit here on the altcoin side. Everybody got a little too excited on some stuff. So it makes sense to give some back here. until the liquidity picture makes more sense. So these jaws, as they might say, are closing, and that's probably with total 2 altcoin market cap coming down to meet the liquidity picture rather than liquidity coming up, at least in the near term. We're also seeing that in legacy, and I'm talking about the S&P and the Qs in an altcoin video because this is not a bullish picture for legacy. Very simply, on the daily cloud, we are rolling over. If we get a bearish TK cross price in the cloud, that is good night for any bullish expectations. That is an additional headwind because, yes, the S&P might be a function of liquidity, but if the S&P is angry, anything that's riskier like altcoins probably very, very, very angry. Bitcoin also is going to be angry if the S&P rolls over here, sub 5,000, sub 4,800. The quicker this happens, the lower this goes. So this could happen slowly to 48.50. This could happen quickly to 46. But much like the past 6 months, crypto wasn't really bullish until Q4. And that's when the S&P bottomed. Q is very much the same. To me, they look worse. This is tech stocks trading in the cloud, bearish. TK cross today, very, very bearish, I would argue. Now, these are both recoverable, don't get me wrong, but we're just stacking up all of these headwinds. We've got liquidity, we've got geopolitical issues, we've got inflation coming back up, we've got energy up, yields rising. It's just going to be very hard. This is my plea, as I talk about altcoins in a minute, this is my plea to the people who think we can't go lower on altcoins to say, yeah, we can go much lower on altcoins if legacy markets roll over. And realistically, this wouldn't be, we're going back to prices last seen in January, potentially for QQQ. We're going back to prices seen earlier this year, right? Even though that might be perceived as a meltdown, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But to altcoins that are already down 50% or more, they could see another 50% drop. If Bitcoin goes to 50K, where do you think ETH is going to go? 2,000? 1,500? Right? It's certainly possible. Sol to 100 or lower? That's possible. So I'd definitely be careful buying dips here. I'd be careful assuming that, we've pulled back enough, right? Over the long term, if you've got a long-term viewpoint, that is probably very much true. But in the near term, I would be extremely careful on alts. 2 others to watch and just have an opinion on: NVDA and SMCI. I keep talking about these because they look heavy, double toppy, triple toppy, head and shoulders Z. None of this looks like bullish continuation up here. It looks like we need a bearish test at the very least, especially with SMCI, which was randomly up 10% yesterday. I don't think either of these are necessarily short candidates, but they both look bearish. They both look very bearish. SMCI looks extremely bearish to me. So if anything, this is a sentiment gauge and a representation of animal spirits and liquidity in the ecosystem. And it's going to be interesting if the legacy stuff bottoms when the alt stuff could be bottoming. That's something to watch in the correlations, right? Do we see 550-ish on SMCI when alts bottom, Bitcoin to 52, whatever it is? This is going to take time. This is probably going to take a month or more, but definitely something to keep in mind here if you're trading alts. One silver lining we got today, a headline about it, stablecoin legislation. Realistically, I don't think this is coming anytime super soon, but the more often this is brought up, the more often this is lobbied for, the more often it's talked about, eventually we should be able to get something through on the stablecoin front in the United States at the very least. And that should be helpful. Now, ideally, that doesn't mean pushing Tether off of all US exchanges, even though that's what I'm sure USDC wants to do. I'm sure they're lobbying for that, or lobbying for rules that would push Tether off of US exchanges. But it may also open up new liquidity avenues for other exchanges. Kraken, for example, they don't have a stablecoin. I don't have any information here, but if I was Kraken and saying where are the things we could do that other exchanges have, that's certainly up there on the list. Should we see some regulatory path for a stablecoin? Before I talk about more alts here, let me mention today's video sponsor, Kraken Pro. Kraken Pro is a complete overhaul of the Kraken trading experience with a one-stop shop for advanced and professional traders. Kraken Pro enables efficient trading execution across multiple markets with a UI that allows for unique optimization tailored to your trading style. You can check out Kraken Pro with a link in the description of this video. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Ventures Inc., PVI, DBA, Kraken. Kraken also put out a Bitcoin commercial for having type stuff, which is always interesting. Definitely give that a watch. They also announced a Kraken wallet today, which definitely makes sense. All the exchanges should try to do anything in their wheelhouse that is on brand for the exchange. So I do think eventually some sort of stable coin partnership or something is probably in the works for Kraken, should there be a regulatory blessing on that. We'll go through all the alts here. On the USD pairs, I'll pick the top by volume. But really, again, you need an opinion on Bitcoin even if you don't trade it, because if Bitcoin's not happy, alts aren't happy. And Bitcoin certainly doesn't look particularly happy today. We risk closing inside of the cloud here. As a reminder, you can always set alerts at levels. You can set buy limit, bids, asks, whatever else at levels as a reminder. But much like this area in January, February, post ETF kind of GBTC outflow related, we may see a similar picture setting up over the next month. Maximum what you'd want to see is a push to the bottom of the cloud here with an eventual recovery after that. For most of the alts, we're actually below the cloud, and it looks much, much worse as you'd expect. But we will quickly get a bearish TK cross, most likely, on the cloud there for Bitcoin. So not all hope is lost yet, but it certainly doesn't look bullish. I guess I'll comment on RSI as well. RSI for BTC reaching levels not seen since that same period in January. Definitely something else to watch for. Will we get a bull div? Will we get a hidden bull div? But I think generally right now you got to keep in mind that up is going to be much harder than down. Down should be the easier path in the moment here. For Solana, on the daily cloud, you can see the pitchfork. We can zoom out on that. But the daily cloud also not bullish here, right? We do not have a bullish TK cross with price above cloud. And that's going to be most alts. Most alts are going to look like this or worse. This is the pitchfork going all the way back. What I said a couple of weeks ago is if we can hold on to this trend into 2025, we're talking potentially crazy targets on Sol. So it's definitely something to continue to watch for. But in the moment, it certainly looks like we're losing daily momentum there. So once again, instantly with the cloud, you can just tell, okay, are we in the cloud? I do nothing. We're below the cloud, I'm bearish. We're above the cloud, I'm bullish. On ETH, on the weekly, zooming all the way out, again, you can see we are back into the bottom of this pitchfork. And what we really don't want to see is a close in the weekly cloud, because a close in the weekly cloud could lead to a bearish edge to edge to the bottom of the weekly cloud for ETH. You'd be losing the pitchfork there. So we have a little bit left to give on the majors on the way down. Bitcoin to 52, ETH to, what is this, 2,500, we'll say. Probably 2,000 realistically, but definitely looks easier on the down than the up at the moment. Doge, same thing. Again, none of this stuff is at a breakout point. Talked about this last week. It doesn't look any better this week, and we can just keep going down the list because there's not really much to say. Ripple hasn't really been a trade for a long time. Just range, chop, mess, dead. I know at some point there was a decent case for this weekly diagonal support, but we've even lost that at this point. So until we're above the weekly cloud, I don't care to even think about Ripple. And even then, it would take a lot for me to actually trade it to the long side. I've said this before as well, but into Q4, sure, send everything. Certainly possible. In the moment, though, we do not look bullish on virtually anything. That includes legacy. FAT, same thing, barely holding above the cloud here. And the best trades are highlighted here. Again, you always want to be there on the long side for that. This stuff up here, if you're a long-term holder, sure, but keep in mind, again, this stuff is up. It's still up 1,000% here. It was up almost 1,700% at the highs. For people to get excited about buying this, again, it needs to come down quite a bit. Anything linked to the AI story is certainly going to be vulnerable to bearishness on the legacy AI names like NVDA and SMCI. TIA bounced a little bit here, but again, this reminds me of Zcash back in the day. Certainly not a bullish picture in the near term. Needs to, at the very least, get above the daily cloud. Near bearish TK cross, below the cloud. just not the time. Just not the time. I guess the other question to ask is, when does this look bad enough to buy? And I think you almost have to use Bitcoin and ETH or Sol as your guide there, because I think some of this stuff could look much worse than the majors and continue to just push lows, because once the bid disappears for some of this stuff, it just continues to plummet lower, right? There's nothing saving any of this. ICP, nothing there. Say, a lot of people were asking me about this a couple weeks back, and you can see when it started to close into the cloud, it was just kind of over as far as momentum is concerned. Render, same thing. It's not over for this stuff, but again, you got to keep in mind, up a lot in a short amount of time, has plenty to give back, and I would not just jump. It's my trading style anyway. I would not just jump into this stuff saying, oh, it's down, what is this down? 42% from highs. This thing could go all the way back to sub 5 pretty easy. So from a risk perspective, I would rather be wrong here and have this retrace to back above the cloud and wait for it than even think about attempting anything before 5, because you could also measure this as a head and shoulders, and then the downside targets get pretty ugly. Something like this could form over the next week and just continue to push lower. It's another AI darling I know a lot of people have been talking about. INJ bounced quite a bit here on the daily, but still below the cloud. Has been in or below the cloud for quite some time on the daily. Just no bullish momentum realistically there on trend. Cardano, far below the daily cloud. Pretty sure we had called out this head and shoulders, and it's really just been good night ever since. Not much else to say there. You can always measure this. You can always say, I'll have bids down here. I'll think about it down here. I'll put an alert down here, whatever, right? That's certainly something you can do. But realistically, the best time to get on the pendulum swinging in the right direction is back above the daily cloud again. So that's going to take probably a month, at minimum. It's going to take some time. AVAX far below the cloud. And from an ease of trading perspective, it's just easier to let all of these trend metrics reset. And we can do this again, right? Take this to 12, take this to whatever. I don't hold any AVAX, so sure, right? What do I care? As a trader, on the short term time frames, send this lower, reset the cloud, right? What doesn't matter to me. It's the community members that are upset. But this very much looks like lower as well, bearish chop. Not something I want to touch. Filecoin, I am a community member of. Kind of is what it is. It's one of the few alts I actually hold. Still in the weekly cloud. Doesn't look great, I'll give you that. But, it's not the end of the world. Another reason just not to be denominated and holding a large percentage of alts in the portfolio. FTM, same story. As non-textbook as this type of head and shoulders might look, or inverted cup and handle, or whatever this might have been, it certainly wasn't screaming bullish continuation, right? We can agree on that, I hope, for the chart pattern purists who get angry at me calling stuff like that head and shoulders. It just doesn't look great, right? Doesn't look great. Looking at Link, I sold my Link at 21 and really haven't looked back. And again, it's as maybe imperfect as this was, again, call it a head and shoulders, call it a diamond top, do whatever you want, but that is not a bullish picture. That is just not a bullish picture. So it resolved as expected. We can always measure this from low to high. And again, we can say, maybe I want to set an alert at the midpoint here. You can always set an alert all the way down here as well. You can put bids down there. This is the original breakout. I could see us getting that bearish, on a wick or something. This goes all the way back to the legacy discussion. That's just starting to get bearish. So if legacy is bearish for a month or 2 weeks, it's not like something like Link is going to magically hold levels, right? At least that can't be your expectation. Even the daily RSI is already pretty oversold. So this may bounce a little bit, but that does not look good. Long term, here's a long-term scare for you. What if you get this? And this would measure basically back to the breakout, right? A head and shoulders lower. So certainly not anything remotely bullish there. Ocean, we can look at Ocean BTC as well, but Ocean, immediately not anything on the long side. Ocean BTC is even given quite a bit back. This is just one we mentioned on the channel for a while. And anything that has this sort of complex inverted head and shoulders, you could always get a higher shoulder, but you definitely don't want to see a new low. A new low and the whole idea is invalidated. But ideally, like everything else, this just does nothing until Q4, holds the higher low, and then in October, in Q4, when the liquidity picture is probably better, then we may see alts start to outperform again. But does not look like most things are happy here right now. That's pretty much it for the most part. There isn't some magical alt that's outperforming. Most of these look tragically awful. Curve, another one just at lows. Most of DeFi looks quite bearish, giving back any of the gains it's made since October. A lot of this stuff, just brutality out there across the board. So if you have any specific questions, you can let me know in the comments below. I do a live stream every Thursday on this very channel around 2 p.m. EST. And if you're still holding an alt-nominated portfolio, I just think you gotta zoom out, give it some time, maybe trim or cut where you are most concerned. But I wouldn't expect a miracle here anytime soon, unfortunately. That's all for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.